Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
All right, my friends, welcome back to the Todd Huff Show, the first day back after Christmas. Here we are between Christmas and the New Year. By the way, as an order of housekeeping, we will be in today, tomorrow, Wednesday. We will be off on Thursday, New Year's Day, and Friday as well. And then we'll be back at it full speed ahead in the new year on Monday. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas holiday. We had a great holiday here as well, my friends. Today, what I want to do is I want to go through the 5 most consequential stories of 2025. Now, I'll explain what that means here as we get that locked and loaded, but that's what I want to do today. Kind of not just a recap of what happened in 2025. It's really a discussion of the things that I think are going to matter tremendously, not just the impact they had this year, but the impact these stories will have in 2026 and in the years to come. So that's where we're headed today, my friends. Before we get started, though, let's be honest here for a moment. When your financial world starts getting a little more complicated, you need more than one-size-fits-all advice. That's where Full Suite Wealth shines the brightest, my friends. Their team specializes in working with families and individuals at your level, where you are, helping you navigate those complexities, offering personalized guidance that goes far beyond the basics, from private equity and private credit to options, strategies, and coordinated legal planning. Full Suite Wealth helps you see the big picture and make confident decisions about your legacy. It's all about having a dedicated team who is fit to guide you every step of the way so that you can focus on what matters most to you, your family, your goals, your future. Want real confidence in your financial life? Head on over to fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future. Okay, so let me explain what I mean by consequential. I kind of mentioned it earlier. We're going to talk about the 5 most consequential stories, headlines of 20 events of 2025. That's what I want to do today. And by consequential, I mean not just the stories that had the biggest impact on a specific point in time. These are stories that change things for the future as well. These are things that have tremendous impact, or the potential to have tremendous impact for the years to come. Now, it is difficult to categorize these sorts of things. I think you know this just intellectually by thinking about it. How do you decide what constitutes a story? How much of that story can I combine other things into it? Do I have to separate things that might be connected into 2 separate groups or 2 separate stories? It's very subjective, my friends, and let me tell you that this is not etched in stone for me. This is the way that I look at it right now. I think that's how I look at it right now. I've gone through this several times, and there's a lot of candidates, frankly, that you could put in these top 5. But I've got my top 5. I've also got some honorable mentions here. I've got 5 honorable mentions that I'm going to hit really quickly, so we can get into the top 5. So, honorable mentions for the most consequential stories of 2025. Now, some of these quote-unquote stories are going to be larger topics. This first one's a good example as an honorable mention. I say the administrative state versus the presidency. This is one that we have talked about on this program for some time, the administrative state versus the presidency. A lot of folks believe, without even realizing they believe this, my friends, that there is a fourth branch of government, that there is the executive branch, which is the presidency, the legislative branch, which is Congress, the judicial branch, which is the courts, the Supreme Court and the federal courts, and that there is a fourth branch, which there's not constitutionally, but some people act as though that there's this administrative state, that the Department of Justice, for example, is separate from the executive branch. It is not. And I understand, well, Todd, what are we supposed to do? We don't want the part of the government that's overseeing law and order to look like it's at the whim of the president. That's not what the founders wanted. Well, that's true maybe to a point, but they did want it this way because they created it this way. There's always attempts to move the executive branch away from the Department of Justice away, and you start doing that with other things as well. People act as or think as though that, hey, this is the way that the administrative state works. It shouldn't be touched. It's its own branch of government. No, it's the branch. It's part of the executive branch, and it's the prerogative of the president of the United States to manage his or her branch. That's the way that this is set up to work, my friends, and that's just not the way that it's been done over time. And I think it's subtle. I think it's a lot of people don't stop and think about it, but they just assume that, hey, these organizations are doing their own thing, but they're not independent of the executive branch. For example, if the president wants to cut the size of those offices, why can't he? Now you can say, well, Congress has the ability to set up and have oversight. That is true. And there can be a fight as to where some of these lines are drawn, but to act as though that this branch can't be touched is a very, very, it's very naive, and it's a far cry from reality as far as what the founders had put into place. That is a big deal because this is where Doge comes in. This is where cutting waste, fraud, and abuse comes in. This is where restoring limited government comes into play. And I think this is a big one. And I hate to not put it in the list, but as we get into this, you're going to realize, like I did, man, there's a lot of contenders here. There's also a battle over the role of courts, over the courts. So you may have noticed these are things that we hit on from time to time. I don't spend a lot of time here, but it's constantly in the background. You have a court ruling. By the way, this is the second. These honorable mentions are not listed in order. They're not in any specific order. These are just 5 things that could have made the top 5. So the battle over the role of our courts is critical. You could combine this with what I just mentioned before, the administrative state versus the presidency. You could say that overall these things combined could be a fight over the role of our government, which may be the better way of saying it, but I wanted to get into the specifics just because these things matter tremendously. Anytime the Trump administration issues an executive order or changes a rule or issues a tariff. And listen, I'm not saying that these things shouldn't go to court. I'm just saying that when they go to court, or a judge makes some order in some cases that applies, they try to make it apply everywhere. There's real problems here. And this, again, it's interesting. We talk about the problems in our system of governance. We talk about, the fight for our democracy. The left says this all. We're fighting to save our democracy. Folks, we're fighting to save this republic. We're fighting to determine to what degree we are going to follow the letter of the law of our Constitution. That's really what's at stake here. What's at risk here. And we're talking about just this overall battle of the rule of law. And there's a battle happening in our courts over their role, what these judges can do, how much power they have. There's a fight over the judicial authority, and just how it applies to things that this president, or any president, obviously, but this is the one where you see all of the tricks pulled out of the bag. And when you factor in how much time that these legal fights can add to the agenda being fulfilled, I guess, then this is a real problem. You don't want the courts to interfere with politics. You also don't want, obviously, the executive branch, to overstep constitutional authority. So there's a legitimate fight here, but I think that it's very clear that there has been abuse, judicial malpractice in certain instances as well. That's another. These are consequential because these fights are going to shape what Trump's going to be able to do in his next 3 years and the direction that this country is going to be headed. Now, another third honorable mention candidate, foreign policy resets that we've seen. We've seen wars that are ended. We've seen peace that has been pursued, peace that has been achieved to some degree. This is not, listen, I'm not here to tell you that there's everlasting peace. I'm not one that jumps on that bandwagon, especially between the peace between Israel and Hamas. I mean, these things are so deeply rooted, and there is so much evil that's being openly embraced by these radicals in Hamas that it's, I don't have any hope that this is going to be a lasting peace. But nonetheless, the things that have happened, even in Trump's first 12 months here, we're 11 months or so in to the first year of his second term. And there's been some remarkable things that have happened between ending wars and protecting American interests abroad. Israel, Hamas, the peace deal there. We have negotiations to end the Russian-Ukraine war. You may have seen even recent headlines. Zelensky and Trump are supposed to be meeting here. Zelensky says he's prepared to end this war no matter what it takes, sort of thing. We'll see where this goes, but there's a lot of headway that's been made there. Headway that was never made previously under the Biden administration, of course. We also have new conflict with Venezuela, but that's like peeling the layer of an onion. A lot of folks, this may come as a shock to see how quickly that this has escalated. But a lot of Americans, we don't always, even here, talk a lot about international relations or what's happening on a larger an international scale here. But Venezuela, South America, folks, the number of countries in South America over the past decades who have gone to the dark side as far as it concerns politics or political ideology, they've been heavily influenced by the Chinese and the Russians and the communists. You see leftist governments that have been established and, of course, collapsed, which is what they do. You've seen those things happen. Maduro, of course, in Venezuela. But we've also seen in recent years some of these countries move back to the right. Places like Argentina and now Chile. There are movements back away from those things. And South America is they're in our hemisphere. They're part of the Americas. This is, so to speak, I guess you could say our backyard, metaphorically speaking. So what happens there has tremendous impact, especially if they're working with, narco-terrorists, if they're working with the Chinese. These things matter tremendously. And so this does, the story of what happens in Venezuela, who knows where this could eventually take us. But if South America begins to reverse the trend of going to the political left, moving to socialist and communist, if that is stopped, Central and South America, and that is reversed, my friends, that is good for, of course, American interests and for the entire world. A lot of the problems, we listen, it's like some people have problems putting the pieces of the puzzle together. When you think of those countries that I just was referencing in Central and South America that have gone to the extreme left, and have suffered tremendously because of that. Now you look at the countries, the places where people have migrated from, illegally crossed our borders, fleeing repressive regimes and poverty and drug lords and all this violence and so forth. They come from those places to here because those places have been destroyed because the ideology produces nothing but poverty, violence, poison, oppression. And so I've said for a long time, the best way to ultimately stop the droves of illegal immigrants wanting or trying or attempting or actually coming into this country is to export the ideas that made America great. And so while this conflict with Venezuela is ratcheting up, this is, in fact, what we're trying to do. This isn't always pretty. I'm certainly not hoping for anything beyond what we've seen as far as the conflict is concerned. But to see pressure put upon these places and to try to clean up the corruption and fix these problems is this is in the interest of the United States of America and freedom-loving people around the world. You could also say, as a fourth honorable mention here, New York City turning to the left, trying to imitate, I guess, the folks in Venezuela, and they elect the communist Zoran Mamdani. I don't want to talk much about this. Depending upon how you look at this, you can say, well, this is an isolated incident in the city of New York. Or you could also look at this and say, hey, this is something that could be a bellwether of things to come. Now, I certainly stand by my belief that the vast majority of Americans are not prepared, willing to accept an open socialist. But that being said, that doesn't mean that there are not pockets of people who do want those things in their particular city. So, again, this could have consequences. There's not much to this story right now other than just to say he's been elected, and we'll see where this goes. But it could be planting the seeds of more socialism. Hopefully not, but certainly around the Democrat Party, and maybe even other pockets of leftist lunatics around this great nation as well. We all know how the story ends, but again, it's a siren song to so many on the left. They love what they hear from these socialists, and they just can't help themselves because it sounds so good, and of course it fails miserably every single time. So that's a top story as well. The last honorable mention that I would say, most consequential stories of 2025, would be the restoration, I should say, of law and order in our capital city, Washington, D.C., because Trump deployed the National Guard there, cleaning up things rather dramatically, rather quickly. And you think about this on a larger scale, talk about the issue of law and order, take the National Guard out of it for a moment, but just look at what it means when a government actually enforces the law consistently again, not just puts things on paper. It's remarkable to me how many people on the left are impressed by what politicians say or by what is written on some piece of paper. If you don't have the enforcement mechanism or the will to enforce it, it is completely and utterly meaningless. And that's what we've seen. And when you have a leader like Trump, this is something, listen, you don't have to like Trump, but you ought to be able to see this. To have a guy who's serious about enforcing these laws and protecting Americans living in these places, all Americans everywhere, but specifically the places where crime is rampant and out of control. And you see what happens. You see what happens when the law is actually enforced. You see what happens when you realize that the person making the decisions is actually focused on results, not just getting approval, not just getting invited to some fancy parties and given some award. He wants to see results. It's amazing to me. And we'll get to this. This will be a recurring theme with another issue I want to get to that's actually in our top 5. But the restoration of law and order in our nation's capital when Trump deployed the National Guard is another honorable mention story for 2025. Those are our 5 top honorable mentions. Now I want to get into the top 5 most consequential stories of 2025, my friends. Before I do that, let me remind you, if you're looking to put your logo on an item, whether that's a piece of apparel, hats, sweatshirts, t-shirts, whether that's something for your trade show, upcoming trade show, the first quarter, banners, pop-up banners, displays, trade show booths, anything like that, things that you hand out at the trade show, things like promotional products, giveaway items, premium products, anything like that, my friend. Red, White, and Brand is here to help you with that. They'll help you put your logo on almost anything. redwhiteandbrand.com is the website. Use promo code Todd. You'll save 10% off your first order. redwhiteandbrand.com, promo code Todd. All right, looking at the clock here, I'm going to try to at least start. The number 5 most consequential story in 2025 is something we've talked a lot about recently, and it was a major story in my state, is the issue of redistricting. Redistricting and the fight for political power. These mid-decade fights over maps in multiple states now, not just Indiana, that are changing the electoral landscape. And it is consequential because these things are being done in advance of the 2026 midterms. And what happens in 2026 in those midterms is going to have tremendous impacts on these other things. Some of these other things I'm going to talk about in a moment. It's going to have impact on other things that I'm not going to talk about here in a moment. It's going to have impact on the economy. It's going to have impact on the advances, improvements that Trump's administration has made in this first year of his second term in office. So this is a big deal. It's the number 5, in my opinion, most consequential story of 2025, the battle over redistricting, the fight for political power as we move into the midterm elections. This will impact all of us in the elections here in 2026, which are just a little over, 11 months away now. So, got 4 more to get to, my friends. Doing my best to be as quick and as succinct as possible, but I've got to take a time out. You're listening here to the home of conservative, not bitter talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. We are going through the 5 most consequential stories of 2025. We had 5 honorable mentions that I talked about in the first segment as well. I just covered number 5 on our list of top 5s. Top 5 list, I should say. Redistricting and the fight for political power. That is number 5. That will have an impact. This will absolutely, I always, listen, this is like, when I come in here, I'm speaking, singing to the choir, right? Preaching to the choir. I know you all get this stuff, but a lot of everyday average Americans don't. And so this idea, this fight over redistricting and how that impacts elections and so forth, it might have seemed like some sort of a theoretical sort of thing. That we've had these fights here the past few months, and they're going to be into the new year as well with the states that are continuing to seek this potential outcome prior to the midterms of 2026. But it will make itself known. The impact, how important this is, will make itself known in November of 2026. Mark my words, you know this, but a lot of people don't connect those dots. It seems like a theoretical, ambiguous sort of, just kind of a strange fight about things that are just in this nebulous of ambiguity. But this is something that will have a lot of practical impact here in 2025. 26. Friends, living with discomfort is tough, let's face it. And while prescription medications can certainly help, they often come with a very long list of side effects, not to mention they come with the risk of dependency in many instances. That's why more people are exploring natural options like Kratom from Christopher's Organic Botanicals. This is a family-run company. They do things the right way. They work directly with Indonesian farmers, lab test every single batch that they produce. No synthetics, no chemicals, no surprises, just honest, natural kratom that's been used for generations. The problems that you hear about come from synthetic blends and contaminated junk that have been peddled by, candidly, trashy sellers out there. Christopher's does not do that. They keep it real. They keep it clean. They keep you informed. In fact, Christopher, I can tell you, I've gotten to know him. He's really interested in you learning about this, whether you learn directly from his website or research on your own. He wants you to be informed about this because when you're informed, you're able to see this issue a lot more clearly. You can go to the website, christophersorganicbotanicals.com. You can start with their Kratom Starter Pack, or you can start by just researching, whatever the case may be. If you decide to go ahead and make a purchase with that Kratom Starter Pack, use code Todd Huff. You'll save 10% off your first order. Again, that's christophersorganicbotanicals.com. christophersorganicbotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency. Okay, number 4, most consequential story of 2025 is simply the economy. You may have seen, what was inflation? I just saw it the other day, Oz. Do you pull up, or I'm not inflation, pull up GDP for November GDP. I can't do this on the fly. I think I know the number, but I don't want to say it. So we've seen under the previous administration what it looks like to have policies that are damaging to an economy. We see what happens when people in the market are, it's 4.3. That's what I thought it was, 4.3% GDP. Now, I know there's a lot of asterisks and things like that go along with this, but on paper, the reality is it measured 4.3% GDP. That is fantastic. I'll remind you, during Obama's years, we were told that 2%, we may just have to accept as Americans that 2% GDP growth is the new normal. Do you remember this? I do. I've been following this stuff for a long time. 2% GDP growth, we were told, is normal. Now we have 4.3% GDP. Remember, we were going to be led into a recession by Trump, and these tariffs were going to be paralyzing and all these things. And now you're even seeing reports about, hey, well, maybe these tariffs aren't as bad. How did we get it all wrong? You've probably seen stories like this. Trump was right. These other folks, these experts, these pointed-headed elitists were wrong. So growth, inflation, you've got the amount of money coming in the form of tariffs. You've got, we're still spending out of control. That's still a problem. But the economy is headed on a much better path. Turns out, who would have thought, economic policy and not just the policy, but the faith and confidence that the people making these business decisions have in the person leading the country is critically important. If you think next week there's going to be some new tax or new burden or new regulation, or if you think that the administration is so regressive, not progressive, but, well, it is the right word to use is regressive when we're talking about so-called progressives. But if you believe that the administration managing these things is so regressive, is such a quote-unquote progressive, that they're actually implementing some of these devastating economic policies, kind of like what we've seen in South America, Venezuela coming back up here to the point of being a reference here. But those sorts of things, it instills fear in the folks running businesses. That makes them not take risks. That means growth is less likely. And at some point, it's absolutely impossible because you've terrified even the greatest risk takers in the country. And so the economy, with the growth, inflation is back under control. my friends. Remember when Trump left office, it was incredible. Biden took inflation up to 9%. I don't even know. Part of me thinks the true story is double digits, but it's 9% inflation. Cost of living pressures were just devastating to people. And this is something that affects people in their everyday lives. They're sitting around figuring out, how are we going to pay for a place to live? How are we going to pay for groceries and gas? And how are we going to do these things for the kids and the college or whatever it is that people are planning to do, start a business? And it has been absolutely horrific out there. But we've made tremendous strides in these past 12 months, thanks to Trump again. And that is the fourth most consequential story of 2025 is the economy. And more good things are to come. In fact, prepare yourself for a 2026 that could be off the charts. This could be a fantastic year coming up. We are in a good position. There's still real problems, especially when it comes to our debt and deficit. I'm not here to sugarcoat all that. But as far as it comes to the growth of the economy, the confidence that we are headed in the right direction, these things are certainly on the right path. Number 3, most consequential story of 2025 is border security and immigration enforcement. Folks, it is these next 3, I think you could put any one of these arguably at number 1. And possibly even the economy. I think it's probably at least number 2 or down. But these next 3, I think, are absolutely just unmatched in how impactful they are on the direction of this country. Border security. When Trump came into office, it is remarkable. And of course, we talked about this at the time. We talked about this at the time when Biden took office. When Biden took office and basically undid everything that Trump had done to secure the border, remain in Mexico policy, all that sort of stuff. And then immediately the number of border encounters skyrocketed, and it remained that way for the next 4 years until Trump came into office. And within 30 days, effectively secured the border. It is unbelievable to me how quickly he did. I had no doubt that he could accomplish it. What I was surprised at, even someone optimistic, little old me, I was shocked and surprised at how quickly he made these improvements, major improvements to border security. Not just to the security, not just to securing the actual border, but also to removing individuals who aren't supposed to be in this country. By the way, this is the enforcement of law. I referenced this earlier when I was talking about the honorable mention of restoring law and order to our nation's capital with the National Guard. We've restored law and order to the issue of illegal immigration. All that's happening is the enforcement of law. People are losing their minds because the law is being enforced, and it's not been enforced for such a long time. This has untold positive consequences when it comes to the cost that the American taxpayer has for illegal immigration, when it comes to drugs that have come across the border, human trafficking, when it comes to gangs that have come up from places, by the way, like our friends in Venezuela, sending up people. You've got Tren de Aragua, you've got MS-13, all that has been stopped and impacted by border security. Human lives will be saved because of these actions. Got to take a break, my friends. Quick time out, back in just a minute. Yes, my friends, I am quite pleased with myself today. I've got the top 2 stories, the most consequential stories of 2025 that I want to get to. It's a lot to get to, and I knew that. And listen, I didn't get to talk about some of these as much as I'd like, and I don't get to talk about the remaining 2 as much as I like, but I'm doing my best here just to get through these today, and I would like your thoughts. What do you think about my list? What do you think I have right? What do you think I have wrong? What have I forgotten? How would you change the list? Whatever. As I told you some things off the top. This is my list as of now. I can be persuaded that maybe something needs moved up, down, whatever. So, Friends, you know one of the biggest challenges for conservatives like us is finding ways to ensure our values align with the way that we live our lives. That includes the way that we invest our money. So I love what the team at 48 Financial is doing. They specialize in biblically responsible investing. That means they screen out companies that don't align with your faith, your values, so that you're not funding things that go completely against what you believe in. They do the heavy lifting for you, helping you align your investments with your purpose, with your goals. The best part is that they'll help you find out if or to what degree your current investments reflect your values. Head on over to 48financial.com/Todd. That's 48financial.com/Todd to take a quick assessment. It's painless. It's simple. I did it. You can too. 48 Financial, because your money should work for your values. Number 2 most consequential story of 2025 is simple. It is the return of Donald J. Trump to the White House. Now, I got to tell you, I went back and forth. Is this its own story? Because a lot of the stories that I talked about are the result of this being the story. So, for example, number 3, what's happened with border security and border enforcement, immigration enforcement, wouldn't even be a story without this one. So they're related in a way, but yet they're their own separate stories in another way. Trump winning the election of 2024, which that doesn't get him the headline because that was a 2024 story. But when he was sworn in January 2025, we had a presidency that reset the federal agenda, reshaped the direction of policies, impacted the economy, impacted the border, impacted the ability or the willingness to enforce the law, instill law and order in this country again. And so many things stem from that. Now, some of you might think, well, how is that not number 1? Well, I got to be honest. I said numbers 1, 2, and 3. I thought you could make the case for all of these being the most consequential. And initially, I thought I was going to have Trump's being sworn in for a second term in January of 2025. I thought that was going to be number 1. But as I sat and thought about this, I truly believe the most consequential story of 2026 or event of 2026 is the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I truly believe this. September 10th, 2025, Utah Valley University. He's assassinated. He's killed in front of students. Many people have seen it. It's terrible stuff. Leaving behind a widow, leaving behind all the drama that we've seen even transpire at Turning Point here, the AmFest last week or whenever that was, a couple weeks ago. Just the conspiracy theories and all of that stuff, right? But the facts are that Charlie Kirk leaves behind a widow and a couple of children. I think that this story and what happened, this tragedy, these things are so sad and tragic. But I think that this has the most consequential outcome, the strongest impact on change coming out of this. I think that the return of Trump to the White House has an impact on this country for the next 3 years now. Absolutely. I think it could impact even who's going to be the president in 2028. I think that there's a lot of things that Trump's return to the White House without any doubt can cause. But I think, when you think about these things, there's layers to this. There's the politics of this, but then there's the heart and the minds of Americans. And the assassination of Charlie Kirk awakened a lot of people. It inspired a lot. Listen, that sounds not like the way to say. Seeing someone stand up for their beliefs and try to just simply articulate them and make the case a solid young man sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ, sharing the beauties and the blessings that we have in this nation. It inspired people. And there were people who heard that message, people that never would have heard conservative truths, biblical truths that were being proclaimed by Charlie Kirk, that they never would have heard outside of this. And listen, the accident or the assassination, the act of evil should never have happened. It's a terrible, terrible thing. But it reminds me of the Bible, the stories of the Bible. It reminds me of the story of Joseph. He told his brothers, what you intended for evil, God used for good. And I think that this story of Charlie Kirk's life and death could have the greatest impact on a movement for years to come. I'm out of time, my friends. I gotta go. SDG.